Welcome to my podcast. Today I will be Armchair GM for the Minnesota Wild and the Montreal Canadiens. I will start with being the Armchair GM for the Minnesota Wild, then I will be the Armchair GM for the Montreal Canadiens. The Minnesota Wild are a team that are really in a tough position because they overpaid some players that are getting old, and the core of the team is mostly of old players, and their young players are not there yet, and they're not ready to step up and overtake the team. In the offseason, the Wild should be looking to deal some of their older players and try to rebuild and allow their younger players to play a bigger role on their team, as well as open up some of the cap room. This is what I would do if I were GM of the Minnesota Wild. Two of the core players of the team that I would move are Jason Pominville and Thomas Vanek. Thomas Vanek is getting paid $6 million next year. The good news is he's only under contract for one more year. This makes him easier to move for the Wild because there would be some teams willing to take a risk to acquire him because he's only under contract for one more year. The reason why you would trade Vanek is because he's playing on the third line, and Minnesota would be better off trying to trade him and trying to get younger players and prospects for him. So the Vanek would be traded to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Ryan Dzingel, Alex Chiasson, and a second-round pick in 2016. The Montreal Canadiens are a team that needed a right winger, so they would be a perfect fit for Jason Pominville. So they would deal a third-round pick of 2017 along with Jason Pominville in exchange for Lars Eller and a conditional second-round pick in 2017. Minnesota would have to retain 35% of Pominville's salary, as Montreal is a team that is kind of limited on cap room. Minnesota will get a conditional second-round pick if Montreal gets to the conference finals with Pominville. The key UFAs for Minnesota this year are Justin Fontaine, David Jones, Jared Stahl, Ryan Carter, and Nate Prosser. The key RFAs are Darcy Kuemper, Matt Dumba, Jordan Schroeder, Zach Dolpe, and Jason Zucker. The first order of business is re-signing Matt Dumba to a long-term extension. I would sign him to a contract similar to what Jonas Brodin got. I think that's a fair value for Matt Dumba. I think they are very similar and they have a similar potential. Although Matt Dumba does have a higher potential than Jonas Brodin, and has a much higher offensive upside than Brodin. Right now, the contract that he is worth would be similar to Jonas Brodin. Another player that I would re-sign is Darcy Kuemper. I would re-sign him to a 2-year deal as he is a pretty solid backup goalie. He can fit in as a goalie that can slot start here and there. You should also bring back Jason Zucker. Jason Zucker is a solid winger. He needs some development in order to be a top 6 winger and needs some consistency. But even if he doesn't develop, he can still be a solid third-line winger. And in free agency, they should add some players for depth. I would sign Moen Horcoff to a 1-year deal as your fourth-line center. That would replace Jarrett Stoll. And I would sign Travis Moen to a 1-year deal. That would replace Ryan Carter. That is just to get depth on the team. And lastly, I would call up Mike Reilly. Mike Reilly never made team last year, as they had some players that were hogging up the depth chart, and he never got a chance to play. So maybe next year, Mike Reilly will crack the team, and he will get a chance to play. So after all is said and done, the Minnesota Wild would have added Lars-Eller, Byron-Dzingel, Alex Chiasson, Moen Horcoff, Travis Moen, and Mike Reilly. They would have lost Justin Fontaine, David Jones, Jarrett Stoll, Ryan Carter, Nate Prosser, Jordan Schroeder, and Zach Dolby. This is how the Minnesota Wild depth chart is going to look after all the moves. The first line would be Zach Parise, Mikko Koivu, and Byalieu-Pateryn. The second line would be Jason Zucker, Charlie Coyle, and Danault-Cousins-Andrighetto. The third line would be Erik Haula, Lars-Eller, and Ryan Dzingel. The fourth line would be Travis Moen, Moen Horcoff, and Alex Chiasson. The first defensive pair would be Ryan Suter and Suter-Spugeon. The second defensive pair would be Jonas Brodin and Matt Dumba. The third defensive pair would be Marco Scandella and Mike Reilly. And the seventh defenseman is Christian Folin. The goaltenders would be Devin Dubnyk and Darcy Kuemper. So that is the Armchair GM for the Minnesota Wild. Now I will be the Armchair GM for the Montreal Canadiens. The question everyone had last season was how good the Montreal Canadiens would be without Carey Price. Well, we found out this season. Price was out almost the entire year, and the Montreal Canadiens weren't even in the playoffs. So this means that without Carey Price, the Canadiens just aren't that good a team. This perhaps means that the Montreal Canadiens are probably in for the toughest offseason yet. So you can bet you can expect some changes in Montreal this offseason, because they need to do something to shake up the roster, because it's just not cutting it in Montreal. These are my suggestions as to what I would do if I were GM. These are the key free agents for Montreal. The UFAs are Mike Brown, Tom Gilbert, and Victor Bartley. The RFAs are Mark Barrio, Joel Hanley, Schenn-Desharnais-Pominville, David Carr, Philip Danault, and Darren Dietz. I would give all the RFAs this year except Barrio qualifying offers. You just give all of them qualifying offers because they're still relatively young and they can still grow as defensemen and young players. The Canadiens should also trade Jeff Petrie, who was overpaid, by the way, to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for Michael Stone and Lard Dolphins, who's one of their better prospects. I like Michael Stone because Michael Stone is a solid two-way defenseman, and Lard Dolphins can be a nice piece down the road. Montreal Canadiens should also consider trading Lars-Eller and a conditional second-round pick in exchange for Jason Pominville and the third-round pick in 2017. The Minnesota Wild would retain 35% of Pominville's salary. This trade makes sense for both teams because Minnesota would be getting younger, getting rid of Pominville, and the Montreal Canadiens would get a right winger to play on the second line. The Minnesota Wild second round pick in 2017 if the Montreal Canadiens would reach the finals. Another trade that I would make is Thomas Plekanec is a good core piece of the team, but at some time you need to make some changes, and this is how you shake it up. Thomas Plekanec to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for Brayden Schenn, Samuel Morin, who's one of the top defensive prospects for the Flyers, and Nick Cousins. So those are the moves that I have for this offseason. After all is said and done, they would have added Brayden Schenn, Jason Pominville, Michael Stone, Nick Cousins, and Laurent Dolphins. They would have lost Jeff Petrie, Lars Eller, Thomas Plekanec. This is how the depth chart would look like after all the moves in the offseason. The first line would be Max Pacioretty, Alex Galchenyuk, and the second line would be Brayden Schenn, David Desharnais, and Jason Pominville. The third line would be Philip Danault, Nick Cousins, and Schenn-Desharnais-Andrighetto. Be Paul Byron, Torrey Mitchell, and Brian Flynn. The first defensive pair would be Andrei Markov and Parise-Koivu-Granlund. It would be Alex Emelin, and third defensive pair would be Nathan Beaulieu and Bealieu-Pateryn. The goaltenders would be Carey Price and Mike Condon. So that is going to be the Armchair GM for the Montreal Canadiens. And that will wrap it up for the Armchair GM for both the Minnesota Wild and the Montreal Canadiens. Do it for this podcast as well. Next episode, I'll be the Armchair GM for the Nashville Predators and the New Jersey Devils.